All right, guys. Hi. Welcome back to another episode of Unlicensed. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Jill. I am the host of Unlicensed, and this is the podcast where real women write in anonymously about any topics that they're dealing with, any daily life struggles. And I invite my different female guests each week to help offer you advice on those topics, including relationship coaches, therapists, friends, family, and social media influencers. As you know, we have the best female guests joining me. I'm so excited for today's episode. We are joined by mental health practitioner, educator, and neurodiverse coach, Stephanie DeSouza. Stephanie's mission is to support individuals who experience the world in different ways and empower individuals who identify as neurodivergent to navigate their lived experiences within their communities. Welcome, Stephanie. We got connected I think it was 7 months ago. I've been so excited for this episode. So welcome.
Yeah, it's finally
Pumped to have you
I'm
here.
really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. As you guys know, we're going to get to know Stephanie a little bit better with some intro questions. Then we'll dive into the advice for today. So my first question for you is, you graduated from Temple University with your degree in clinical social work. Obviously at a younger age, 18 to 22, when you're deciding what you want to do with your life, you already knew that you wanted to do something that's devoted to helping others. So how did you know that you wanted to do something that was devoted to helping others, something like social work too?
Well, actually, my undergrad is in business management.
Oh, wow.
So I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I always helped people. I was always that friend that, people would come and talk to, and I would lean on my friends as well. So I was thinking teacher, business. So my family was like, oh, I think you'd be good in sales. I think you'd be good in business.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I went for undergrad and I took stats, 1, 2, and 3. Hated it. I think I failed one of them. It was awful, but I made it through. And then I worked for a year for an attorney, and I'm like, this is not what I want to do. I was dreading it. I was nauseous every morning. I just was anxious. It just wasn't a comfortable environment for me.
Yeah.
So what I did was I went and found a job working with adults with disabilities. So I was using some of my business background in helping people with disabilities, paraplegic, people that were deaf, hearing impairment, vision issues, find jobs. So taught them computer skills, did job search training, practice interviews, and that's really how I got started on this path. And then when I was there at night, because I was married, I was a mom at that point, I went to Temple at night to get my degree in social work.
Okay.
And that's where I kind of found my place and my people.
I love that. And it's really cool to see the transition. Obviously, you have this business background. You said you worked for a lawyer, which I can't even imagine the stress of the situation. What advice would you have for someone making that transition? I think so many people have anxiety about getting a degree in something specific and then wanting to switch that up later in life or right after you graduate. I have some friends right now that are in careers and they're like, I don't like this. I'm not happy. I have a lot of anxiety from it, but I feel like they're afraid to really make that jump. I've been someone the same that's been in a particular career and then had to make that jump later on. So what advice would you have for someone who's interested in actually transitioning over to something new?
I would say just follow your heart. I mean, I know sometimes it's hard if you rely on that full-time job, right? And you can't just quit and go to school full-time. So it took me 5 years to get my master's degree because I, had my son to take care of. I was a mom. I was working full-time at a day job. It was a lot, but I knew it's what I wanted. So I didn't rush it, I think I didn't feel like, oh my God, I have to do this in 2 years, right? Because you could get that degree in 2 years. So I think just talk to people, do research. I really love high school students that take gap years. I really respect that. That is not a thing when I went to high school. You just went to college or you didn't. And I worked at a high school with teenagers for 15 years too. And I love the fact that they don't feel this pressure to just maybe move in the way that their parents moved or some of their peers move. Is really just pay attention to you and what's speaking to you.
Yeah. This new generation, I am so jealous of them because they are the first people to put out their hands and say, we are not going around the status quo of what you guys have been doing for years. And I think that takes so much strength in a way that my generation as a millennial probably really didn't do. I think most of my classmates, I don't think any of my classmates didn't go straight to college right after. Even I know that there were a few where school wasn't really for them. So it is really cool to see that. You did mention that you obviously worked in a school setting. I saw that you were working at a K-6 through K-12 school for almost 15 years. What made you want to pursue, you were doing like director of counseling services.
Director of counseling
so
services,
what made you interested in like that educational like background in the sense of working in that sector?
So when my son was about 5, I wasn't in the education system and I just wanted more time with him and I wanted my summers off selfishly. So I was a social worker.
That's so fair. You're like, I'm not trying to work this summer.
I just want some time off. So the awesome thing about social worker, and I highly recommend that field if you're thinking about that, is that you can work in schools and hospitals and community centers and senior homes and like anywhere. So it's really a diverse field where they really need people that understand other individuals and can be compassionate and empathetic. So I started to work at a school as a social worker on a child study team, which is where I actually started to work with autistic children. And that kind of got me on this journey working with individuals, more adults who are neurodiverse. So I was in school system, different places for a couple years, and I landed at an amazing community, the Pennington School in Pennington, New Jersey, where I was director of counseling services. So that was a private prep school, 6th through 12th grade. But we had a center for learning. So we had students who had dyslexia, ADHD, auditory processing issues, right? So they still maybe were in AP classes, but their processing, the way their brain learned was different. So I just loved the fact that I could be in this community where there were diverse learners, right? And educators all in the same space and making accommodations that didn't feel exclusive. They were inclusive, right? For our students who maybe needed a one-on-one or needed a smaller class setting or needed extra time.
I love that. And I was going to ask you your journey of becoming a neurodiverse coach because I wasn't sure if there was someone that you knew personally that made you really interested in this line of work or something with school, but it is so cool to hear the background. And I love that you guys had the different accommodations for everything because I definitely grew up in school settings where if you had any sort of learning differences, they made everyone very aware of it, almost in a way that you should be ashamed of it and people felt embarrassed about it. So I love that you were in a setting that really accepted that in a lot of senses too. I was on your site and I was reading a little bit about the difference between a neurodivergent like coach versus therapist. A neurodivergent therapist, for example, they're going to look backwards to address past traumas, mental health conditions, patterns, while a neurodivergent coach is more future forward focused towards goals of the future. What made you want to pursue coaching within that sector versus therapy? Because obviously both are very important, but one's looking more at the past of things and why you are the way that you are and how your brain works versus one's looking at the future. So interested as you as a person, what made you interested in more of the coaching?
That's a great question. So when I was doing therapy, because I had experience with children with autism and working with neurodivergent learners, I was in a group practice and I would get the teens or the young adults or the parents who had someone in their family who was autistic. And what I found when I was doing therapy, I actually was doing more coaching. Right? Because sometimes people who are neurodivergent really have a hard time emoting or communicating in that way that traditional therapy sometimes expects or asks people to reflect upon. And it just was overwhelming. And they walk through their days, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, masking, right? Looking like they need to fit in and not responding or not reacting or maybe not behaving in a way that they would if they were home someplace else. And that's exhausting, like mentally, emotionally exhausting. And I just found that my clients were coming and the therapy was great, but it wasn't helping them in the here and now. And I just felt this sense of urgency to be like, okay, what's happening? What happened at school this week or what happened at work? Like, talk to me about what fight you got in with your husband or your wife, right? Or your partner. And let's just talk through some strategies. So I think it organically happened, honestly. And then during COVID, when we were all locked away, I got certified as a neurodiverse couples coach, where one partner is neurotypical and one partner is neurodiverse. So that's kind of where it all. So I was still kind of doing therapy, but I was also, stepping into this world of coaching. And I have to say, I'm loving it. Like I'm not missing therapy right now. If that's
You're
awful
like, I'm
to
glad
say.
I made that switch.
Yeah. I mean, therapy is great. I've done therapy. It definitely has a place in our society. It's important. But I think for people who still are struggling at school or in the office or meeting deadlines, right? Or being able to come home after a long day and communicate with their partner. Like talking about what happened 10 years ago is not necessarily going to help them move forward.
I love the forward future approach of it. I think that's so important. You said it perfectly, especially if you're not able to express or communicate things in a way that typical therapy would have you do in the past. So what you're doing is amazing. I definitely want to talk about like the goal within neurodivergent coaching, because I was reading on your site, it's not to like normalize their traits, but it's really to celebrate their strengths and develop strategies. And you just mentioned that. Can you kind of talk about the importance of self-acceptance within neurodiversity? Because I think we already kind of covered it a little bit. I think so many people want to put any type of brain that is different, like in this very niche box, and they want you to fit in with the society. But there's so many people who are just perceive the world in a completely different way. So can we talk a little bit about self-acceptance and like the coaching aspect of that within the neurodiverse community?
Yeah, another good question. So coaching is really helping somebody find their own voice, whether it's neurodiverse coaching or other type of coaching, right? Is just to be comfortable where they are and what their situation is. So I think accepting how your brain works and working with it and not against it is 80% of what I do, right? So I work with CEOs, I work with doctors, I have, partners in businesses to managers, right, to college students that I work with. And it's interesting. So there's this phenomenon called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is very typical for people that are neurodivergent, ADHD. So ADHD brains or neurodivergent brains are sensitive to begin with, right? So they're incredibly sensitive to criticism. And a lot of neurodivergent individuals are also black and white. So it's hard for them to see the gray or understand the meaning in between like the subtext.
Fascinating.
So what's happening is, if somebody at work says, "Oh, Stephanie, like this email was great. Can you just change one sentence and fix this one thing?" If I have a neurodivergent brain and I'm experiencing that level of sensitivity, internally I'm saying, "Oh my God, I should be fired. I'm a loser. I can't even write an email. Like, I don't deserve to be here." Right? So that is a lot of what individuals experience that are neurodivergent. So it could be like internally because they get stuck, they perseverate on the negative loop because it's either good or it's bad, right? It's hard to say, "Okay, that's good feedback. I'm fine.
This is a growth opportunity for me in that sense."
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think a lot of the coaching is honestly helping deprogram that negative loop.
Got it.
For individuals who could be in their 60s, right, and are incredibly bright and incredibly accomplished.
Yeah.
But forget where their car keys are, right, all the time, or forget to pick something up, and they're just like, "Here it is again. My wife or my husband or my partner's going to be mad at me. I forgot something for my child," right? So that's where the coaching is really helping somebody turn into like their own inner coach versus their inner critic, right? Is really, and it's hard. It takes time and it's a lot of work. And I love that aspect of it.
That is so fascinating. I feel like I just learned more from you in this 1 second of that than I could find in any article online. For that too, when can you tell the difference between someone's mind just going towards that route of, hypercritical versus family upbringing and having a parent that may have been super hypercritical to them and then that manifested into something else? When can you tell the difference? Is it all looped into one? Is their brains like programmed that way because of someone?
I think that's hard all the time to tease out. Like if I have a client and they've had an amazing childhood, parents get ADHD or autism because it's just part of their family, right? Like there's a genetic component to autism. So there's common where there's more than one person in the family who is neurodivergent. But so it may not be a parent criticizing a child necessarily, although that happens, but it just could be like you said, our society is built for neurotypical individuals, neurotypical thinkers, school systems, work settings, going to the market, right? It's sometimes people with neurodivergence have sensory issues and things are too loud or too bright and too noisy. So it's hard for them to go to the market where I'll speak for myself. I don't think twice about those things, right?
Yeah.
So I think it can be organic just in the messages that individuals get in high school, in college. Even working in college, we had to work, right, in groups for group projects. That can be really challenging for somebody who's neurodivergent, right? Because their communication style may be different. They're not as verbal, or, they feel put off if somebody's not including them. So I guess to answer your question, right, it can be both.
Yeah.
But I also think it's important to understand that unfortunately our society also just sends these messages, even if they're not intentional, they really cause damage.
It's not a one like glove fits all sort of thing. Every situation is
Not at
different
all.
within that
Yeah,
too.
not at all.
I love something that I really do in that family aspect that we're talking about is that I know with some of your clients that you work with, you will sometimes bring in like parents, colleagues, siblings, which I think is so amazing, like the support system behind that. My last question for you is how important is that support system for your clients and just people in general? I think with therapy, I was thinking about it. You have some families, for example, who are super supportive of their child or partner, whoever, going into therapy. And then on the opposite side of that, you have a lot of families who don't believe in therapy. They may
Yep.
not be supportive. They think it's a bunch of shit, which is a
Yep.
whole different episode
Yep.
that we'll have to cover at some point. So let's talk about
Exactly.
that like support aspect and why you wanted to bring that aspect into your coaching as well.
So I'll take high school students, right? Because
Okay.
that's such a fragile age, and it's such, parents are excited for their kids to be in high school and think about college. And a lot of the individuals that I work with are, again, like intelligence is not an issue. It's just that they learn differently, they process differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they may be better off listening or hearing, or reading something that's in bigger font, right? Or hearing it multiple times. There's good thing. Lots of great apps out there now for people that, learn differently to help them. But I found that parents are anxious. Parents want their kids to succeed. They want their kids to look good. And sometimes, and I think I fell into that too. When my son actually went to the high school that I work with, he's 28 now, but like we live through our kids a little bit too much, right? Like we're like, oh, if they strike out or they're not getting good grades, like what does that mean for us as an adult? So I really try and just separate, like this is your child's life. This is their experience. You love them. You want them to succeed, but you've got to check your own issues or your own anxieties and keep them away from
Not projecting on them. Yeah.
So telling your kid, I don't understand it. You do really well in math, but you're failing English. Well, maybe math, their brain is mathematical and analytical and they don't like English.
Yeah.
So yes, the dopamine in our brains is what keeps us motivated, right? And individuals who are neurodivergent sometimes don't produce as much dopamine, especially
Really?
ADHD
I
brains.
didn't know that.
They have a lower level of dopamine. So that's why, right? So some kids with ADHD can hyper focus on something forever and ever.
Yeah.
And then other things they're like can't.
I'm not touching that.
Because
Yeah.
their brain is making it difficult for them because the dopamine isn't going.
Yeah.
So it's understanding brain education. So I do a lot of like kind of psychoeducation with parents. And I say, your child isn't lazy. It's not, they're smart. They're not trying to like be a pain in the butt or embarrass you. Their brain is focused over here and not over here. So we need to, as a team, help develop ways for them to be able to sit down and do their homework. So maybe it's 20-minute chunks and not an hour, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they can't work in their bedrooms. It's just too distracting there. So maybe they're working in the kitchen where maybe a sibling or someone else is doing homework, or maybe they need a quiet setting. So I think I try and take out like the parent's ego. Like this isn't about you.
Yeah.
Right? And yelling at your kid is not helping them, and they're already feeling so badly about themselves because they know they can do it, and there's so much shame and embarrassment and guilt that also follows individuals with neurodivergence because they aren't fitting into a system, right? That works for other brains, but not theirs.
But
and
not theirs.
Education, and that's why I love education and school, but it really does shine a light on challenges. And it doesn't necessarily support those challenges, so that we have so many kids and young adults who fumble and fail through high school, and it just completely beats up their self-esteem. And then those people turn into adults who make it through, but then still have some of this, right? Because we're never taught, how do I deal with time management issues or executive function, right? Planning, organization, all of that. We're never like taught about that. So,
No. It's just expected. And you're so right. You're put in a bubble, in a box. If you're not the kid in class who's got everything and the time management and priorities and deadlines set, you're looked at as lazy, or you're looked at as, the distractor of the class or the class clown, when in reality, there's something happening in their brains. And this is so fascinating here about like the brain chemistry behind it all. That's not allowing them to move in the same direction as everybody else. And then, you're right. Then they become adults and then they're in the workforce and might have the same labels and things put onto them. And then if they have kids, the cycle can continue in terms of like feeding that if they are not educated themselves about what's actually going on. So I love what you're doing because whew, my mind is blown. I'm like the dopamine. I didn't even know this. This is so cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
It's good. It's like it's funny. I'm 56 years old. I've been doing this for over 2 decades, and I really feel like I've found my passion again. Right? Is helping people understand their brains and work with themselves and create strategies that are realistic and doable without constantly like beating up on themselves or getting fired from jobs or, you know, being unsuccessful in relationships. It's a lot. Like executive function is in all parts of our life. It's not just work or school. It's how we communicate, how we plan our activities.
Relationships, everything.
Everything.
It's so cool what you're doing. And I love that you found your spark again with the passion because that's like the best feeling, I think, for everyone. I think that's a perfect segue into our episode for the day. Awesome. I hope you guys got to know Stephanie a little bit more and enjoy getting to know her. I know I have. Before we get into the episode today, a word from our sponsors. Today, our sponsor is Plot Twist, guys. This is the dating app that allows you to team up with a friend, putting connection and safety first on your dating journey. If you're someone that is ready to get out in the dating world, and we've talked about this on Unlicensed all the time, a lot of women, especially when it comes to the apps, have a lot of anxiety just going on the apps in general because putting yourself out there is absolutely terrifying, but also just meeting up with a stranger is really scary. You're going out with someone that you don't know and you're already nervous about it in general, and you think to yourself, man, this would be so much better if I have my best friend here with me going out into this dating experience. So this app allows you to team up with your bestie and putting dating and connection first, making dating more fun, more social, and ultimately safer. It's so cool because it was founded by 2 female healthcare providers whose mission is to tackle the loneliness epidemic. So if you guys want to get started on your dating journey today, head to the App Store, type in Plot Twist, or head to my Instagram at Unlicensed Advice. Use code Unlicensed and you will get started today. But guys, thank you for tuning in for the sponsor. Back to the episode. I am so excited for today's episode. We are talking about dating specifically on the spectrum. We're talking about autism specifically, but I think this is something that's really important for people to know, especially if you're neurotypical even, but you might be dating someone on the spectrum. Becoming educated for yourself, for knowing what to do, how to communicate, how to express yourself, how to make them feel very comfortable too in those dating situations as well. So this person wrote in and they said, I'm 25 years old, autistic, and I've never been on a date before. I consider myself fairly high functioning, but I do notice that social situations, especially with the opposite sex, make me anxious. As someone on the spectrum, dating can feel overwhelming. It's hard to read social cues, know when or how to flirt, or understand what's expected in a romantic context. Sometimes I overthink things or feel mentally exhausted from trying to mask my traits to fit in. That said, I really want to start dating and putting myself out there. I'm open to dating both neurotypical and neurodivergent people, but I don't know how to go about getting a date or how to approach telling someone that I'm autistic. Should I mention it on a first date or wait until I've built some trust and connection? Also, there are some things I struggle with that might come up in a relationship, like sensory sensitivity, needing alone time to recharge, or not always knowing how to express emotions in a typical way. I want to be upfront, but I'm not sure when or how to do it without scaring someone off. How can I start dating in a way that feels safe, authentic, and respectful to myself? So I'm so excited to talk about this. Obviously, we have the perfect person, guys, here today to dive us into it. So I have a bunch of questions for this person that hopefully you can answer and give some advice for. I think to start off, it's going to be really important to just offer a definition of what autism actually is. I think a lot of people have misconceptions about autism. They have very straight, narrow-minded of what it is. So for us all to just understand what it is so the questions make sense later on, are you able to offer a definition so we're all on the same page?
Sure. So autism is a neurodevelopmental difference, right? And how our brains process and experience the world, basically. So it's brain wiring, right? So, and typically people with autism or autistic people, they may have difficulty with social communication, so picking up on social cues, reading body language, facial expression, how to use social language, right? So it's not just, please give me this. It's, I'm not sure how you want me to do that. Should I do that? Like giving options. And sometimes people with autism are very concrete and direct, right? And it's like, I don't want that. I want that. No harm intended, or I don't like that. I would prefer that. And that's it. Like no soft words, right, around it. Like I think a lot of us do because we're so worried about what people think of us.
Yes.
Sometimes for us. And sometimes you're the the person that emailed you also talked about sensory integration, right? So sensory overload is a big thing for people who are autistic too. Again, lights, noises, textures, smells, right? So it could be a lot. So yes, if somebody's on a date and it's a noisy restaurant, or there's something that they don't like and the smell is distracting to them, try to have a conversation, right? And flirt and talk and chit chat when you've got like all this noise happening, if you will,
Yeah.
right? And your body is just overwhelmed. So that's where sometimes people, neurotypical people, I'll say, right, can manage all of those senses, and then other times they can't.
Yeah.
Not in all cases, but in general.
It's cool to hear. I didn't even think about like the smell aspect of it. As soon as I read this prompt, I immediately thought noise, maybe sights if there's like a lot of bright lights, but smells and other senses I wouldn't even think of. In terms of like autism appearing, I read that it typically appears in the first 2 years of life. For parents listening in today, what signs might their child be exemplifying that they can know, oh, maybe this is something that we need to go get a more formal diagnosis? And what does that formal diagnosis actually look like, if you're aware of that, in the first 2 years of life?
Yeah. So typically parents, will say like developmental milestones are delayed, especially speech and language. Eye contact is also something that tends to be a predictor of autism, like not, and you'll hear people with autism say it like physically hurts my brain to look at in your eyes, right? So sometimes people with autism will look at the forehead or the chin, where they've learned to do that to be socially acceptable, right?
Right.
So eye contact, play is sometimes atypical, if you will, right? So children may be more interested in lining up trucks by color or by size instead of vroom vroom and crashing them and driving them all over the house, right? They may not necessarily engage in interactive play. They may engage in what's called parallel play, right? So they could be playing next to a child, but not really have interest in what the other child's doing, or asking the other child, come play with me or show toys, because they're just so hyper-focused on what their brain is interested in and what they're visually seeing.
Yeah.
So those are some, and I think doctors and pediatricians are doing a much better job now of not ignoring parents' concerns as they did maybe 20, 15 years
Oh,
ago,
yeah.
right? It's okay. They're just delayed. They'll catch up. Because what we do know is when autism is diagnosed, it's really, really helpful to get as many supports and early interventions as possible, like speech language, physical therapy, occupational therapy helps with some of the sensory overload issues.
Okay.
And then to answer the other part of your question is those evaluations are observational, right? So there are people who specialize in diagnosing neurodevelopmental issues like autism, so pediatricians, psychologists, and sometimes if it's a young child, it's more observing. Could be interviewing teachers if they're in school, or interviewing parents. They'll also get a family history because, there is a genetic component to autism.
I didn't know
Or
that.
so we know. I know the science is still out there, but
Okay.
yeah, so there's typically, yes, a genetic component. There's like something else that throws it into full-blown autism,
Interesting.
which isn't quite known yet, and people have theories. And I'm not a scientist, so I'm just kind of sharing the latest that that I've been told about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's just a team of people, and it could just be a checklist of symptoms, or they could say, is there anybody else in your family that's autistic? So that family history is important, right? And it's interesting because if there's a child with autism, people with autism are often very anxious. They may have OCD. They may have executive function issues, right? There's a lot of other kind of these other manifestations of things.
Right.
So they'll ask about that, right? Does somebody have anxiety? Is somebody ADHD? And there seems to be, in my experience, a family member that if they don't have autism, they have some other maybe piece of some either mental health issue that's closely related to autistic individuals.
Wow.
So
Fascinating. I had no idea the genetic component until we were talking today. I think just my own biases and things that I've read too, I almost thought that it was like no one in your family could have it, and then that child might just have autism. So that's really cool to know that too. For someone later in life, let's say an adult in their 20s who might notice that, they interact differently, and maybe sensory, there might be signs that they have autism. What does that diagnosis look like later in life? Because obviously when you're 2 getting diagnosed, you can't
Right.
speak, you can't talk. So it's going to
Right.
be the examples that you just mentioned. But what would that look like for a 20-year-old who might want to be like, okay, I actually want to see if I have ADHD or autism or something on that like neurodiverse scale. And what advice would you have for someone who's nervous or having anxiety about getting a formal diagnosis later in life?
Yeah. So I'm not stuck on diagnosis
Okay.
unless you need it for some reason,
Okay.
right? Like you need treatment, we need to work within the medical system, right? Unfortunately, insurance is not always wonderful, but sometimes we need those diagnoses. I would just say like I mean, I have people that come to me and they'll just describe their symptoms or their challenges and without saying, like, do I have it? Don't I have it? Like, what do you think? And I'm not a diagnostician. I don't assess and evaluate and prescribe. But I ask them like, okay, like what's going on? What's happening? What would be helpful for you? And some people really want to know because they feel it's like the missing piece. Like there's something always that's been challenging for them and they could never put their finger on it. And the interesting thing is women are often misdiagnosed or undiagnosed because of gender bias. So in females who have autism, they usually present differently. They may be quiet, they may be shy, they may be reading their book that they love to read about forests or right cars or trains or travel, and they're not necessarily acting in different ways that typically, right, we say boys do, that are disruptive or running around or making noises or screaming. So for a long time, they're like young girls were not diagnosed with autism, maybe anxiety or depression.
Yeah.
So then they went through high school and college, right? Dealing with something, and they were getting therapy for something that they didn't have. They were being maybe medically treated for something they didn't have. So that's a big piece of it too, is sometimes people just want to know. And there are clients I have that are so validated. Like, yes, that doctor was wrong, or no one
Yes,
listened
this is
to
why I
me,
feel this
right?
way. Yes.
Right? Like,
yes.
this is why this is happening. And it's so validating and helpful because, again, then you understand your brain better. Like,
Yeah.
getting back to the brain science,
Yeah.
right? This is why I think the way I think. This is why I communicate. This is why this is hard for me, or that makes me anxious, or this setting I avoid like the plague.
Yeah.
So I think it depends. And then some people, who may have had a lot of emotional hardship, that diagnosis is devastating, right? It's like, oh, one more thing, right? Because as a society, again, we look at autism as a negative, and I'm really working hard. And this podcast and just talking about this is that it's not, it's just different. It's not better. It's not worse. It's just different, right? And there's so much good and interesting things that people who are neurodivergent can see and think about that neurotypical people can't.
Yeah.
And I think it's appreciating the differences
Yes.
instead of pointing fingers of like, well, you can't do that. You can't do that.
We talked about earlier, like the self-acceptance factor and why that's so important. And I do think I was reading an article of like the benefits of dating someone that might have autism. And it's like loyalty in the situation, honesty, bringing this like beautiful new perspective to the world. Why do you feel like people are unopen or unwilling to even consider dating someone who might be on the spectrum if they're neurotypical, for example?
I think just misconceptions and stereotypes. I mean, honestly, I think we've done a little bit better about putting autism out there and showing people who are autistic in jobs, who own major corporations, who are gazillionaires, right?
Yep.
in our society, and in movie roles too. I mean, I think there was a stereotypical of what an autistic person or child was. But I do feel like there are shows like Love on the Spectrum.
I was gonna ask you, do you
my
watch
God,
that?
I'm
I love that show.
obsessed.
I met
I'm
Connor's brother out, and I'm like,
I'm so
it's not
jealous.
Connor, but by association, this is the coolest thing ever.
I am obsessed with that show. And it's funny because I've actually, I'm like talking to people and want to develop a dating app specifically for people with autism.
Wait, that's so cool.
Because I'm like, I have a son, neurotypical son, who was very easy, made friends, girlfriends, college, is engaged now, getting married. And I just really feel blessed as a parent. But I also just feel so much for those parents who can't go out to the market or can't go to the movies, right? Because their child can't manage that, or their kid can't go to like a typical prom or high school, right? So I am just so, I don't know, I just feel so passionate about having companions in our lives and being able to have intimacy regardless of how our brains work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So love on the spectrum. I'm obsessed with Connor.
I'm so obsessed. I was going to ask you about words that you would like to offer to parents, because I think when specifically talking about dating, and let's use the example of maybe someone who has like high support needs, so maybe like limited communication skills, and they need their parents to really help them with those day-to-day things. They're not really able to navigate the world without that caregiver. So I think when it comes to romantic relationships, you really do see the people affected is the parents who want that for their child so much, and they were able to experience it as well. Are there words that you can even offer to them? Because I think every parent, most parents, like want to see their child having that romantic relationship and having that person that's going to take care of them when they're no longer here. And that's something that when I was watching the show, I was like, damn, this is really tough for a lot of parents who want that for their kid, but that may not ever be in the cards for them, just based on like, again, that communication and not being able to express and stimuli and everything that would make dating possible in the first place.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I have a word for the parents, but I also have a word for families,
Okay.
right? Support your siblings, your brothers and sisters who have children with autism,
Yeah.
right? Just make it a safe space. Holiday dinners can be really hard, right? And their kids may not be able to sit at the table, and sometimes that's not tolerated. Sometimes it is. So there's always this anxiety. So I think just again creating an inclusive space, regardless of where you are, and really being able to lean on family members for support, because parenting a child with autism can be so isolating. And like, I'm alone. Nobody gets what I get, because you can't, like, I met some of my best friends through my son being in Little League, right? Or in being in the school play.
Yeah.
A lot of kids on the spectrum, right, cannot manage that level of sensory input, or manage to be like to sit still for that long. So I think it's finding people that support you and that understand you, and I think being okay with you, like being okay with your situation. And again, a lot of that comes like with shame and guilt and embarrassment when you have a kid screaming and yelling in a supermarket, right? Like, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's human nature. We all have gone through that. But to have that be every single time you go out, and or to the mall or to the movies, it's horrible. Like, it's really horrible. So I think parents, like, you're not alone. I've done some support groups in the past, and parents have really felt a sense of community in that. So finding a support group somewhere, or a community that that you can lean on, because parents have to mask too, right?
Never even thought about that.
They have to move through the world like they're doing everything they can and they're doing a good job, and their kid is, or they can't send their kid to a typical day camp because they can't manage all of the activities, right? So I feel really strongly about, again, speaking to people in general, but families need to support families, and it's really, really hard for parents.
I love that you're building spaces for them to feel connected, because I'm sure it is, so easy for them to feel so alone in it. And like you said, isolating to the point where you're not even realizing that, hey, there's actually someone else that's going through the exact same thing, that even though the days are hard, you have that person that actually understands exactly what you're going through, and that makes things feel just like a little less lonely in that sense too. Within community as well, I want to talk about like certain terms to use and not when it comes to like the neurodiverse communities. So I was reading on identity first language. So instead of saying an autistic person, saying a person with autism. Can we talk about the importance of that language and why it's important for all people, especially neurotypical people, to use the appropriate language when working and meeting people within the neurodiverse community?
So, and I think the neurodiverse community is split, right? So there are some people who want to be called like autistic person, autistic man, autistic woman, right? So they want the identity first. And then some people prefer Stephanie has autism, right? Or this woman has autism. And I think I heard somebody, I don't know where I heard it, but they described it, I thought it was a great example, is we don't say somebody has tallism
That's
or
so
somebody
true.
has shortism, right? We just say they're short, they're tall, or they're petite, right? So why are we saying, this boy with autism? And I do it too. I catch myself, but the bottom line is I think you just have to ask people
what they prefer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
It's very easy, I think, for people on the outside just to like group everyone into one bubble, and that's kind of the issue of it. But you're right, people within the community, some might say, no, I actually prefer this over this because I'm my own individual person. I'm not like anybody else in this group. So I actually love that point. I think when it comes to people on the spectrum too, especially I want to talk about maybe someone with like low support needs. So they're handling day-to-day tasks by themselves, eating, sleeping, going to work, having a job, dating, relationships. But obviously they're still having struggles that are pertaining to being on the spectrum. Can you name what some of those things are? Because I think a lot of people think that if you're on the autism spectrum, they immediately go back to media. Like, you cannot do anything for yourself. You have this parent walking with you. But obviously there are people that are like I mentioned, they're out, they're having jobs, relationships, they're navigating the world very well, but they might be struggling with some of those other things. What might that look like for those struggles that you may not be able to just see right off the bat, right? But they're still struggling with on the day-to-day basis.
So, I mean, anxiety is a big piece and a big component for a lot of people with autism. So if you've got so much anxiety, it may be hard holding down a job or advocating for yourself. If you're always nervous and if you're always worried about what if I make a mistake or what is somebody going to think of me. So, sometimes being able to manage a full day is challenging, right? So it could be a part-time job and maybe not a full-time job. It could be they're able to manage their activities of daily living, like showering and making food, but living on their own feels a step too far, at least. Like if there's a real safety issue or something happens, again, the anxiety can kind of sabotage our brains, right? And take over. And then it's hard to think like through logical solutions or be calm in certain situations. So, and it could be language issues, right? I mean, there are individuals who are incredibly bright and intelligent and they have no language, so they use technology. So I think it just, I think it just depends on, kind of obviously what they're comfortable with, right? And what's safe and authentic and for them versus me or you saying, well, you can do this, you should be able to have a full-time job. Not all the time, right?
No, not all the time at all.
Right,
it's like everyone has their other differences too in that sense too. I'm glad that you brought up anxiety because this person obviously mentioned that they have a lot of social anxiety, especially when talking with the opposite sex. Does social anxiety feel the same with someone that has autism versus someone that might just have a general anxiety disorder? Like, is that social anxiety going to feel the same? For me, I have social anxiety versus someone that has autism. I'm actually so fascinated if it feels different or if it's feeling exactly the same what I'm feeling in my body versus someone with autism.
Yeah, and I think, again, that can be individual. Like, if you meet somebody with autism, you meet one person with autism.
Yeah.
So, and anxiety can be different. So if, you have social anxiety, you may be worried or concerned about how do I talk to different people? How do I switch conversations, right? How do I mingle? I'm afraid I'm going to be sitting there by myself, right? Or no one's going to talk to me. And then someone on the spectrum, their social anxiety could be that they have difficulty just in a back and forth conversation with somebody. And that like they know it's appropriate or socially acceptable to have that back and forth conversation. And that's exhausting for them, right? Like that takes a lot of energy and effort. So that's how it could, maybe look for somebody with autism who their concerns or issues are a little bit different. Like they may not care what people think of them, right? But they come home and their mom or dad's going to say, how was the party? Who did you talk to? What friends did you meet? Did you make any plans? Right? Are you texting anybody? And they're like, no, right? So sometimes it's just avoiding that kind of situation versus I think, is it the room? Is it the space, right? Is it too many people?
Love that breakdown.
And that could be the same thing for somebody with autism, but not because of the social piece, because of the sensory piece, which can also make them like anxious and just overload their central nervous system.
Yeah.
It's a lot for the brain to process sometimes.
So much. I want to talk about neurodivergent burnout within that because I was reading one of your articles. Also, by the way, the writing, you're such a good writer. I was reading all your blogs. I was like, oh my gosh, what can't she do? Amazing. But I wanted to talk about neurodivergent burnout, which is a form of exhaustion characterized by intense physical and mental fatigue. And it's rooted in constant effort of navigating a world that's not designed for neurodivergent minds. Can you go into a little more detail about what that looks like and some of the harmful effects of that for someone with autism?
Sure. So again, I think a big part of that is masking, right? So is going to work and being a supervisor or a manager or, working in retail, and you have to be on.
Yeah.
You have to resist the urge to kind of just take the break for 10 minutes because you have to be available, right? Or you have to manage stress and phone calls and people asking you questions. So it's not being able to take a break. Some individuals with autism stim, like they have body movements that kind of helps calm them down. It's like they're, like sometimes people would fidget. My son Jordan has his best friend, I'm giving Dan a little shout out, right? But when he's excited or happy, like he stims, he rocks his body, and it's like his way of his body processing happiness, right? So when you can't do that because it doesn't look acceptable, unfortunately, right? There's no space for stimming, for hand waving or rocking back and forth necessarily. I would like there to be, but in corporate settings or in work, right? Are you going to walk up to somebody who's moving their body in a way that feels uncomfortable or unsafe? Unfortunately not, right? So it's kind of like managing and looking typical when your instincts and your body is craving for maybe more movement or quiet. So then imagine going through your day like that and then coming home and needing to help your partner with the kids or to get dinner ready, right? And all you want to do is just shut down and sleep for an hour. So just an example, and a college student, you can imagine, right? Navigating a roommate, navigating parties, classes, all of that. And it's kind of navigating your day and really hiding.
You're so on all the time and you can't just do what you want to do.
And that really takes a toll. It really, and then you're so burnt out, you can't focus. You can't plan, right? You can't get your work done on time. You can't communicate to your partner. You can't emote. It just impacts all aspects of life.
So when you're coaching with your clients too, obviously a big thing for you is this self-acceptance. So when you're helping, your different clients navigate this world, are you telling them to embrace these differences and navigating that? Or is it allowing them to experience the world in their way, but get out of their comfort zone and actually stepping into those experiences? What does that look like? Because when I immediately thought of masking, I was like, that's so exhausting. I can't believe that. But I know maybe some coaches might try to have you navigate the world. Well, don't do that. Do this instead. And it's like, no, that's what's making them so exhausted and burnt out and everything. So what does that look like within your coaching styles and techniques too?
I think for people that have the time, that are able to take a 10-minute break, maybe they need a 10-minute break every 2 hours. Go sit somewhere quiet, turn the lights off, right? Wash their face or get outside. That could really help somebody. Maybe it's, okay, you have a 2-hour meeting that you have to sit in. What's going to help you get through it? Do you need to walk and move before it? Do you need to have some food or drink during it? Do you need something to fidget with? Right? So it's not because they want to be where they are, right? But it's just helping them maybe modify some of the ways they go about moving through their days without making them feel guilty about it or shame.
Love that.
So we all like a coffee break, right? And we talked about dopamine, right? That can be a dopamine boost for somebody. So if you're going to do something that's like a non-preferred task or something you're anxious about, that cup of coffee or my cup of tea, right? It sounds silly, but it really does help your brain then have energy and motivation to move into or to engage in whatever that task is.
I love that. Modifications, but not totally closing off who you are as a person in that sense too. I think that's so important, especially entering the dating world. So let's add in some dating questions too for this, which is so exciting. So what advice, I guess, would you have for someone in terms of like first meeting someone in terms of dating when they're on the spectrum, do you think, dating apps, I know you mentioned the dating app before, family, friends, hobbies, what's a good way for someone who's autistic to first meet someone when they're interested in dating and pursuing someone romantically? Is it, again, case by case?
Yeah.
This person might love a dating app, but this person needs to get out there because social cues over texting might be really hard for them. What does that look like?
Exactly, right.
Okay.
So some people may love the structure of a dating app,
Okay.
right? They can see a picture, they get some information about the person. Maybe they're more comfortable with texting or messaging and not the face-to-face at first conversation, right? Like a Love on the Spectrum, they had speed dating. That was like one of the episodes, right?
Yes.
And that may work for some people, but not others. So, so it could be the structure of the app. It could be more comfortable if they go to a familiar place. Like, so let's say they are meeting somebody, right? And they're at that place.
Yep.
Let it be familiar. Like, so that it's, because the newness of it, like, is it noisy? Is it loud? How do I get there? Where do I park? Or how do I, like, all of that, or even going a couple times if you have a meeting place that you've never been, right? So it's kind of just, kind of preparing or getting yourself as comfortable as you can, because that situation, regardless of how much we relax and do mindfulness, it's nervous. Nervous meeting somebody new. And then to have the added kind of burden, if you will, or the added kind of, okay, what do I tell this person about myself? Do I tell them I'm autistic? Do I tell them that I'm going to need to go to the bathroom for 15 minutes and 45 minutes, right, after talking? Or I can't stand the smell of wings, so don't order wings. Right. So it is a lot. So I think it's trial and error too, a little bit, right? Like someone may think I had a client that they just wanted to put it out there, and I'm like, great. Yeah, okay. Like, that's what you want to do. Go, right. Go
That's the way to do it
Go
then.
for
Yeah.
it. And it wasn't the best experience. And it wasn't because of them. It was because of that person, right? So I'm like, this wasn't about you, right? This was about this person. And so she has tried different ways to navigate that, and now I think she's at the place where, let me see if there's even a connection. If I even feel like I want to see this person a second time, right? So and that is perfectly fine, right? Because we all don't want to disclose things about ourselves right away. So why should people with autism feel like they have to either? Like, and maybe that's, I don't like assumptions. Maybe that's just they want to get it out there because maybe they stim, or they have little quirks about things, or maybe they have bad eye contact, right? And that's where, like, getting back to the app, that could be helpful. These are the things I prefer. These are the things I don't prefer.
So when you're planning the date, you already know what to do.
Yeah. And it's out there. And it's not a secret.
I love that idea of the app in terms of like already putting out like the information of that sense. So there's not so much unpredictability within that as well. And I was going to ask you too, I guess it just depends on the person, but with tone and cues, I think for some people it may not work. And for other people it may work. Me, even dating apps, half the time I'm like, I can't read the tone of the voice of this. Are they being sarcastic? Are they not? Maybe not for me. So I like the case by case. I want to go back to what you said in terms of picking a place that's familiar. I love that, because I was going to ask you, in terms of especially like sensory sensitivity and overload, there's some places that are not going to work for a date. An amusement park may not work for some people with autism on a date. It's going to be too much, or like you mentioned, the smell. So does that just go back to communicating that up front in terms of things that are going to work for you in places? And then, like you said, choosing someone familiar is probably the best for someone, maybe for the first date, just in terms of familiarity. So you're not having that like unpredictability for starting off.
Or maybe it's choosing a space that's just more neutral. That's not a restaurant, that doesn't have smells or noises, like park or a small coffee shop or something that's just not, as intense. And then then the person can even see, okay, is this person worth my time and energy, right? Do they deserve me? Should I share what's going on and some of like what helps me and what makes me feel more comfortable? Or not.
When it comes to boundaries with that too, especially maybe let's use the example of someone who has autism that might be really sensitive to physical touch. As a coach, what would you say to a client in terms of communicating those boundaries? Because I think women in general, this is going to be good for them to hear in communicating boundaries. I'm someone on a first date, unless I've known you as a friend before, or I've known you for a while, we've been talking for a while. I'm not like a big like physical touch person. I don't really like to kiss on first dates. I don't really want you like holding my lower back on first dates, anything. So what would you like to say in terms of coaching and ways to like effectively communicate boundaries with that, especially when it comes to physical touch for this example?
That's a great question. And I think it's really important, especially for women, because we do feel like, again, we want to fit in,
Exactly.
right? And if we're not letting somebody hold our hand or touch our shoulder, they're going to think I'm a weird, something wrong with me. So how do I manage that? So I think it's like one, just to be clear with yourself, like, what am I okay with? What am I not okay with? Right. Just think in general, like, am I typically comfortable with even my parents' friends or aunts and uncles or people that I'm meeting for the first time? Right.
Right.
So I think it's okay to be really clear, especially on a first date. Even like the body language of if somebody, like leans in, you can just put your hand out for a handshake, right? Or so I think
Love that.
I think thinking about it a little bit before. So, because sometimes when we're caught in the moment, we all get nervous and anxious, and we're like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? And then we tend to, I'll speak for myself, I tend to do the thing that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm like, oh, I didn't want to, but I just did because I felt it was the right thing to do. Right. So I think it's just being clear about boundaries. And then as things are progressing and things are looking like you like this person and maybe there's, you want to be intimate with that person, it's a conversation. And those are hard to have, especially around sex and intimacy, but they're good for everybody to have, right? What I like, what I don't like, what touch is okay, what touch isn't okay. But I appreciate you asking this because yes, there's obviously a lot of, can be sensory overload when we're being intimate with somebody.
And in terms of those steps, like getting more intimate and physically intimate and emotionally intimate with someone, I know a lot of the times people that may have autism have trouble expressing their emotions. How do you go about that as well in terms of, I guess, can you coach someone to express their emotions, or is it just something in terms of dating someone that can accept that you may not be able to express your emotions as well? What does that look like in terms of a coaching side for you too?
So when I coach couples, like for example, right? Sometimes the individual doesn't know that they've had autism or neurodivergent until they're into the relationship. So that's one kind of situation, right? But again, I think it's, we all have likes and dislikes.
Yeah.
So I think, and again, it isn't always easy, the communication piece, but then it's talking about timing, right? So, when do you want to talk to David about, where you like to eat or where you don't like to eat, or where you might like to vacation, or are you comfortable sleeping in the same room, right? So I think it's, again, prep. Getting them comfortable. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Especially if your partner knows that maybe there are some just differences in how, people communicate,
right?
That you can't expect that to be exactly how you would either. I mean, I think you have to give people, I always say, give people grace, that the intention is well-meaning. Like if you're in a relationship and you're starting to build one and you care enough to spend time and devote time, just trust that the intention, right? They're not necessarily meaning to be dismissive or hurtful or sarcastic.
Yeah.
And then that's where some of the coaching can be, like asking clarifying questions. Maybe if it's a difficult topic and the person's anxious about it, like let the someone know that you want to talk with them later tonight.
Love
or
that.
give them the heads up, right? So that you have the time to think about it, they can think about it. And sometimes texting, like even though, right, we're like, face-to-face is better and you can, hear things in their voice, not for everybody.
Some people might need that to actually get out all of their emotions and have time to kind of process it as they're writing it versus in person, you're on the spot, you're like, I have no idea what to say now that you're in front of me.
Sometimes I have a journal that people can share, so they may write things down and leave it.
Oh, I really like that. I need that.
Right?
I love that.
To kind of pick it up and respond to it and see, and then write it down. I mean, it works really well for certain situations.
Yeah,
but not
case by
all.
case again, but still.
Yeah. So I think again, it's
Love
just
that.
finding ways that are authentic and comfortable for individuals.
Yeah.
Where we're not forcing them to be the square, not forcing them into this box.
I think that's so important. And you just gave so many examples of how people can go about that, which I think is so important, like finding the thing that works best for you. You mentioned the word prep, and it's actually related to a question that I had because I know a lot of people with autism, they love having their routine. They love having, familiarity. I think we use the first date in that sense. But pretend they're dating someone who's a little more spontaneous, that likes to do things on a whim. How can someone with autism balance and honor their need for that routine while also adding in elements of spontaneity?
Yeah.
So they're, doing things that their partner may enjoy as well.
Yeah. So I think it's planning for spontaneity.
I love that. I feel like
So-
that's me. I'm like, okay, let's do something crazy, but like, let's plan it like 3 days in advance. So it's not really spontaneous, but it kind of feels like it.
Right. So, I had a couple I was working with, and the one partner loved just, oh, let's go out to dinner.
Yeah.
And, the other partner was like, oh my God, I just can't move. And I wanted to watch my show tonight and have the dinner that I was thinking about all day and get to bed by 10 o'clock. And so I think, again, it's communication, right?
Yeah.
So I could say, okay, your partner wants a surprise, or like, so be prepared that they're going to come home one day this week, Monday through Friday, right? And say, let's just go out to dinner. And then you need to kind of mentally prepare yourself that there may be 1 or 2 days that you need to be flexible and be okay with adjusting your schedule, but then know that the other days you'll be able to kind of plan things, and that you need to communicate with them as well, right? So I think they need to honor, like, partners need to honor each other, right?
Definitely.
And it's like interesting when I'm working with couples, more so the neurodivergent couple, who tends to be the husband or male a lot in the relationship, feels like they have to do a lot of the work. Like, they need to accommodate because they don't do this the right way, or they don't emote, or they don't, right? So it's my job, which is really hard and challenging sometimes, is to take away the finger pointing and to create the balance and the compromise, right? And it takes work. It takes work. And like, the unfortunate thing is, when couples are struggling and they go to typical marriage counselors for years and years, and there's no known issue about, or like known fact about, the neurodivergence, either the couple doesn't know it, or the therapist isn't picking up on it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that can be like disastrous, because
Detrimental.
Oh my God. So I've gotten so many couples that are literally at the last string. They are like, I don't think this is ever going to work. We've been working on this for 7 years.
Wow.
So so unfortunately, it's been so harmful to the relationship, because it's made their trust worse, their communication worse. Like, they're angry, there's no follow through. Well, like, why isn't there follow through? Because maybe that neurodivergent person, right, needs that follow through to look and be different than what the neurotypical therapist.
Especially if you're working with a therapist that can only think in the sense of how that neurotypical client that they're working with thinks.
Right. You have to kind of think through the neurodiverse lens. So I think, again, clinicians are getting better at identifying, maybe after 5 or 6 sessions, something just isn't like progressing here. Like, there's continued frustration. Let me ask some more questions, or let me consult with somebody. Maybe I need to refer this couple to somebody else. Yeah.
When you're working with clients who, let's say, a neurotypical and then a neurodivergent client too, because it seems like you work with all aspects, which is really, really cool. I love that you're doing that. What advice for people listening and would you have for that neurotypical person? So the advice for the neurotypical person in terms of dating someone who's on the spectrum or neurodiverse, ADHD, in terms of communication, expressing emotions. I love what you said earlier of just going into dating in general, knowing that not everyone has like malicious intent. Like, sometimes people communicate things poorly, but their intent is not to hurt your feelings. Or sometimes people just say shit and you're like, man, not the right time to say it, but you realize that after. So for someone listening in that's neurotypical, that might have begun dating someone who's neurodivergent, what words of wisdom or advice would you have for them?
I would just say, be curious. Like, ask questions, don't make assumptions, right? So, and I think we do that a lot in general. But I think it's like, what's comfortable for you? Or, is this okay? And you could tell that neurodivergent person, like, I need you to ask me the same questions. Fair. Right. But I think just don't assume based on a TV show that you watched or, an article that you read. Again, everybody is individual and not going to be the same thing for people just with the same, diagnosis, if you will.
Yes. It's not a case by case. We keep talking that. I think that's so important. I love that we keep going back to media too. What's like a show you've watched or something that highlights someone with autism in just a negative light that you're like, no one should ever watch this or read this or anything before. This is not what it's like. Does anything come to mind? I'm trying to think of myself because I feel like just growing up when they were depicting someone with autism, it was very like one track minded and every single character was exactly like that. And there are people that are like that, of course, but then again, people don't realize that it's a spectrum. So when you meet someone that later in life, oh, I have autism, oh, you have autism? Like, never would have thought that because
Right.
you have this one character in your
Right,
mind
right.
from a 2002 movie. Does anything come to
I
mind
mean,
for
I
you?
can't, like, in the moment, like, I mean, I think of Rain Man, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think that's just so, I mean, I thought it was a beautiful movie, right? I think the relationship between the brothers and Tom Cruise's character, like, really
Yeah.
giving up his own agenda and just allowing his brother to be who he is and was, right, was beautiful. But I sometimes think that could be a stereotype of this like savant like person who is brilliant in music, you know, could sit down and play piano for the first time just by hearing it,
Right.
or with numbers or analytics, but can't, you know, carry a conversation, or wants to eat the same exact thing for lunch every day, right? So I can't say. I mean, I think there are those stereotypes out there. Again, I think shows like Love on the Spectrum that are just showing these individuals
Yes.
as wanting intimacy and relationships and love, just like everybody else, and then the parents too.
Yes, I
Right? I
know.
love just seeing like the parents and what they've kind of gone through with their children to get
Yeah.
them to this point,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I think it's just be curious, and it's okay to ask questions, right? Better to ask a question. Like, I'd rather ask somebody, how would you like me to refer to you?
Yes.
Or what are your pronouns? Like, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, do you prefer this intro or that intro? Like what's comfortable for you? What can I do to make you feel more comfortable? And then I would encourage individuals who are neurodivergent, and that it's hard, you know, being a minority in a way too, to, you know, to be able to say like, I would prefer to do this, or I would prefer to go here, and this is why.
Like
This makes
advocacy
me
for
more
themselves in that
comfortable.
way.
Yeah. Say that, and I say it also that I know it's not easy.
That it's not easy. Two things can be true. Like, you want that to
Yep.
happen, but you know that might take a very long time for that to happen,
Yep.
which I think is so
Yes.
important. I have one more question for you. This
Yes.
time flew. I'm like, oh my gosh, killing it. I want to talk about rejection within dating, because we kind of were talking earlier about like how people with autism, neurodiversity, that like hypercritical, you know, in terms of that too. And I was reading how neurodiverse individuals may experience and process social rejection differently, that it feels way more intense and longer lasting. Can you describe why? It might go back to our conversation from at the beginning of the call with, again, just brain chemistry and everything as well. But obviously rejection is something that happens in dating. I can attest to it. And I feel like it is very important for
can
maybe this
too.
person listening in, that if they start going on dates and maybe there's someone that, you know, doesn't want to date them, it has nothing to do with them. It might just, you know, be where they're at in their life and what they're looking for. Just so people are educated about why that rejection might feel so intense for someone with autism. I'm very interested to hear that myself.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it does go, you know, back to kind of how the brain processes information,
Yeah.
right? So, people with neurodivergence tend to be rigid in their thinking, black and white thinking, right? So, by somebody saying, you know what, like, it was really nice meeting you, but I don't think we connect, or like we have things in common. So that person could take that as, oh, okay, like this person thinks I suck or I'm awful, and this is so insulting, and this is just another reinforcement of me being rejected when I was in high school, or not fitting in this group, or being the only sibling that isn't married or has a partner at this point, right? So it can go to that space, instead of like someone being disappointed, but also thinking, oh, like, okay, great, like glad I know now, and that I didn't like waste my time and continue going on these dates.
Right.
So it's that social nuance, right? Too, sometimes, is again being able to maybe interpret something as not a negative critique on me. It's just that we didn't have things in common.
Yeah.
Right. But it unfortunately goes to like the place of, I'm never going to meet anybody. Nobody likes me. I'm 30 and I haven't found a partner yet. I'm still a virgin. Right. Like all of that.
Yeah.
All of that.
I think that's perfect advice for most people, especially women, because it's so easy when you're dating someone and they don't want to date you for whatever reason, you immediately get to, oh, they think I'm ugly, they think I'm stupid, they're hooking up with someone who's better than me, instead of just the reality of the situation, which is sometimes you're just not compatible with people. And there's nothing that you should have to change about yourself to make yourself more compatible with that person who doesn't feel that initial like attraction in any way. So I
And
think that's
sometimes that
perfect
person
advice.
just doesn't deserve you either. Like they're just like not in the same headspace.
Yeah.
And and they don't, yeah, like
Different leagues.
absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. But
Yes.
yeah, but you have to get there.
Yeah.
Right? Like I know, I was on a dating app. It's hard. Lots of ghosting, lots of rejection, but but it took me some time
But
to
you
be
found
like,
her person.
and I'm like, okay, thank you. Like I'm glad, like don't waste my time,
Yeah.
right? But it honestly took me some time to get there.
Yeah.
But it's like, and it's experience. And it's also helpful to have somebody to process those experiences with.
Definitely.
To help reframe it for you, to help, have you maybe have that person see it in a different light as instead of like a total rejection.
I love that. Everyone goes through it. I'm going through the same thing right now. So it really is helpful to know that you're not the only one
No.
that is experiencing it. I think that's
No.
a perfect place to leave off being rejected on dating. But I had so much fun today. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming. This was an awesome episode. Honestly, like I feel like I learned so much. I hope people listening in learn so much and you guys can really view this community in a way that maybe you hadn't before. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I know that I did. If you want to listen to more amazing episodes with amazing guests like Stephanie, you know where to find us on all of our streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, we're everywhere. Head to my Instagram or TikTok at Unlicensed Advice to watch fun video clips. And the full episode is on YouTube if you are a visual person like myself and you want to see us using our hands and all the craziness of it as well. But I love you guys. If you do have a story to share, we are obviously taking more input for this season and next season as well. So head to that link in bio, go to the Google form or my website, www.unlicensedpodcast.com, and we will get it answered for you with amazing guests. But I love you guys and I'll see you next week.